Okay, we're going to go through the thought process and mechanical process of installing a bollard, a galvanized bollard, and the purpose is to protect this gas meter from being hit in this location. Now the purpose is not to stop it being hit by a truck, because trucks don't come up here. It's to stop the client from accidentally hitting it with her car. And so the size of the bollard that I've chosen is 2-inch galvanized, which is enough to alert the client that she is about to hit the gas meter without causing serious damage to the car, and close enough to stop it from causing a gas leak. So that's the purpose. And believe it or not, in many cases, a section of pipe like this that would be a good bollard either is unavailable or costs more for a dual threaded nipple than it does for a 21-inch section of pipe. So I've brought the pipe on site. I've used an angle grinder with a metal bit, which you can see right here. Took about five minutes with this 4.5-inch angle grinder to make the cut. And I'm going to use the top threaded side of the bollard to put the cap on, and I'm going to drive it into the ground about 2 feet so that it sticks up about 3 feet, and I'm going to put some reflective tape on it. So that's the technique. The cost for installing this bollard is $450, and all in all it's going to take about 2 hours of time and $100 in material, so it works out to around $140 an hour, something like that. This drill is a core bit, so I've got the hose hooked up, and I find it helpful to start the drill running at a high speed and then slowly lower it. I also, if the surface angle is a little bit difficult, I have some plywood that has a hole drilled in it, just the same size of this bit. So the bit then slides through the plywood sleeve, and I stand on the plywood, and that just stops the drill from bouncing all over the place. So we're going to go through this. This is a core drill, so it's going to leave a 4-inch core. And when I've drilled all the way down, I'm going to go into the dirt to get a bit of a core of dirt to help do some of my digging. And then it'll just be a matter of adding a little bit of quick set mortar and threading on a cap. So a relatively simple process, but it's a way to alleviate client anxiety and provide an additional service. Getting the pull to get this out, but we've got this core middle bit fairly loose, but it may have a chip at the bottom. Because we're so close to the line here, we have to be sensitive to not accidentally drilling through a gas line, even though by code it's supposed to be deeper. because we've got that bounce I've been curious about, and the hose is running full and it's not spilling out anymore. So what it's saying is we've penetrated a drain pipe. So it's a good thing this has come up for this video, because it's one of the things to factor into a bid is how you want to handle running into a utility in the process of installing a bollard. Okay, so this is a great video to explore diagnosis and evaluative thinking and problem solving, because we've done the first hole, as you saw, and water was draining away rather than coming back up. The same thing is happening with this hole here, so it's more likely there's a drainage fabric of some kind, and perhaps some drain fabric or some other kind of slightly bouncy material under there. So what we're going to do next, since this core is not coming out any easier than the old core, is we're going to use a hammer drill to go down through the center and possibly shatter the core a bit. And in the process, we should be able to get it out in pieces, even if we have to bring a shop vac tomorrow. Okay, so it's a few minutes later, and our hammer drill has gone down all the way through and allowed us to pop this core out quite nicely. And what it's revealed is not a drain pipe, but bamboo roots. So that's what was creating that little bounce. And the ground has obviously settled in this area, so creating the hollow, which is why the water was draining away. And so what you can see is we've got a bamboo wall about 12 feet away, and what that's telling us is that 12 feet away, underneath this whole expanse of concrete, is a dense mat of bamboo roots. So this is a first a first situation, so I'll see what kind of drill or use of the, like this 6-foot crowbar is best to get through those chutes. So the 6-foot crowbar was just fine at punching through the bamboo mat at the bottom, and so I went down about 18 inches with the bar pretty easily. I'm being careful to be sensitive to the unknown location of the gas line here. Now the good news is it's a metal gas line, and I've run into these before with heavy equipment, and amazingly you can hit this with a 4,000-pound bucket on an excavator as you're plowing through a trench, and you can feel the resistance of the steel line. So I'm relatively safe, but I'm not going to hammer this bollard down quite as much as I would if there was no gas line in the vicinity. And I'm going to leave it up high like this, because I just backed up this slope myself with the truck. And when you're backing up, you can see this slope here. Unless something's sticking up fairly high, you don't see it as well. And worst case scenario, it could always be cut down later. So that's my strategy on this bollard. And so even though we've had to dig another hole, which I'll patch with mortar, and ran into all of this, we're still on schedule for getting this fully complete within 2 hours. And this is just the type of stuff that often comes up, which is why I like to come to a site with more tools than I think I'll need. In this case, the the spare hammer drill has saved the day. So the final part of this is I'm going to use the back side of this post hole pounder on top of this 2-inch coupling. And I'm using the 2-inch coupling because it's flat, and I'm pounding it in place with the fitting because the pipe will actually distort if I hit it with a sledgehammer or with a post hole pounder. But the fitting is much stronger than the pipe itself, so that'll hold. And if there is any damage up to this top here, I'm going to unthread this when I'm all done and just thread on a cap. So just be careful when you're doing bollards to put a fitting on the top before pounding it in the last little bit. So that's going to complete this, and then I'll go on to our next project in a few minutes. So one of the things that I think is important in saving money, and we're mixing up the filler for our bollard here after pounding it down easily another foot and adding the 2-inch cap, is rolling a little bit with the materials and situations and things as they play out. And what I mean by that is I've got half a bag of thin set mortar left over and no tile jobs in sight. Now thin set is going to do a perfectly adequate job of binding this up in this tight location. I'm not sure if it's going to be better or slightly worse than mortar, but the important thing is it saves a trip to the masonry shop. But I carry the same approach into a number of areas. For example, this bollard is leaning a little bit to the right. Now I could take a couple of minutes, it would literally take about 3 or 4 minutes to straighten it out. But I'm actually a little bit more concerned about this cap scraping the car door on this rather narrow driveway than I am in getting that bollard straight. And I realize that with the degree that it's off, leaning in towards the house, it's just about enough that it makes it more likely that the car would hit this portion here rather than the top, and I think that would do less damage to the body. So I mention this because if you have an aversion to cutting corners or a sense of being highly professional and doing everything perfectly, you can spend a lot of extra time and it doesn't always increase the benefit to the client. So I will be very perfectionistic in a sensitive area. In a situation like this, I'm not worried about it at all, and I would say that it's this attitude that doesn't cost the client anything, but actually, since I do everything by the bid, probably accounts for about 15% of my profit during the year. And maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%. But I think it's a significant amount, and it's a good area to look for savings on jobs like this. So that's going to wrap this up here, and we're going to put the rest in the dual hole. And the biggest mistake that I made, if it was a mistake, was to not think of using the hammer drill to pull that up until after I drilled the second core bit. But we're still at about an hour and a half on this particular job here. It's providing the service to the client. And I wasn't particularly worried on this particular driveway because of all these cracks and how ugly the driveway is overall. and also the fact that in my design and long-term plans, I've encouraged the client to consider resurfacing this driveway. So if she takes my advice, there won't be any extra patch to be aware of. So there we are, a bollard to protect a power meter for $450, installed despite numerous hiccups. On the same vein of efficiency and creativity without compromising function, because there's this big hollow under here, we're finding that a lot of the thin set was just pouring down and not actually filling it up to the top. So before we put all the thin set down there, we've decided to pack the hole with chips of concrete. And so I just used the back side of the crowbar to break up a few of our lumps. We're going to pack that in. That's going to increase the strength of the concrete and will mean that we won't have to run out. So just a little tip, and I'll often do that in a fence post or something. If I'm running out of concrete and there's some rocks nearby, I'll just grab a few boulders and pack them in. It increases the stability of a fence while saving concrete.